Hello, everybody. I'm gonna put some of my stuff down. I brought some friends with me. There's food right outside the door out there on the yucca plants. These will help me to kind of think and to frame some of the things I want to share. Elements of our lives, elements that are familiar, and some that may not be. My name is Nephi Craig, as you said, and sometimes when I hear people introduce me, it's like, who are they talking about? Because my reality is a humble one. My reality, I work and live on the Mountain Apache tribe. I'm the chef and mentor of, when it's really busy, up to 32 eager, young, hardworking young Apaches. Right now, I've got a staff of about 12 young Apaches, and different age levels, different techniques. So, as we talk about my keynote today is supposed to be about spirit of food, and in the spirit of acknowledging our communities, one of the first things that I'd like to frame this dialogue with is that we are very fortunate to be here right now as food professionals, as scholars, as accomplished peoples in our own disciplines in this pathway of understanding, development, health, nourishment, so many different things. We're so fortunate to be gathered to even just speak about Native American food. Right now, back home on the White Mountain Apache tribe and many other reservations or islands of indigeneity, the people are so busy inside this bubble trying to secure food and find food that they don't have the luxury and the privilege to begin to contemplate decolonization, to contemplate a pathway, to contemplate spiritual resiliency. So that reality, that energy needs to go home. So remember the foods that we eat today, like it was said over and over, food is medicine. It's a very powerful ideal, and it's a very, very humble one. So from my community, from my kitchen, all my Apache chefs I was with last night, we were cooking and hanging out. So now I'm here, and very, very privileged to be speaking about things that over less than 100 years ago I could be jailed for or attacked for physically. So very, very real things that I want to bring to light. So the reason I'm dressed like a civilian is because native foods and trying to capture the spirit of food is about perception, right? One of the biggest things that when I go everywhere and talk about this, people come up to me and they say, "What's the biggest misconception of Native American cuisine?" I say, well, the biggest misconception about Native American cuisine is that it doesn't exist, So it's all about perception. So I'm dressed like I normally would be at home or when I'm hanging out. And then so as we all, in our own pursuits, we all have our own hats, right? We all have our own titles and perceptions. So, I put on my chef coat, and maybe you'll believe me now, right? So, and then again, I'm just transforming into my natural indigenous habitat, right? Because on a daily basis, this is how I look, So I'm cooking, working, learning, and sharing. So food and food traditions are extremely powerful. And when we create the framework of indigeneity, it's not just indigenous specific. Every human being is an indigenous person to somewhere on this planet. So when I speak, although I'm indigenous-centric or Apache-centric or Diné-centric, we're really talking about food and the human universal principles that emerge in laborious tasks like cooking, or laborious tasks like agriculture, or the things we discover about science, archaeology, all these different disciplines, they're all intertwined by food. So I want to, in our pre-reservation term for ourselves, from my dad's side, from the Navajo side, the Dene, and then from my mother, Maridi, the Inde. Both terms mean the people. So when we think about those pre-reservation terms for ourselves, we're not talking about one person. So it's not Nephi, it's the group, the people. And so when we work towards pushing and creating this energy force that's the Native food movement today, and even in our kitchen, when my whole team is there, we see principles emerge. And when we talk about pushing the team forward, when my team of Western Apaches comes together, or when we're with a group of elders, what do we do in the kitchen? We all work together. And then that goes back even farther into our Apache philosophy of we're activating ant power. So each member of the team is equally powerful, equally valued, and working for a common goal. So that also tells me that the pre-reservation terms, there's keys to our own indigeneity in the landscape. So when we begin to focus on that, we open little doorways towards decolonial methods to recovery and identity, indigeneity. So all these little wonderful things are all intertwined in the food too. To kind of talk about the spirit of food, man, it's like, how do you encapsulate vitality, you know? How do you begin to describe that feeling you have, you know, that ratatouille moment, right? That, you know, shot back into time. How do you begin to create that and share that? The only way that you do it speaks to reciprocity. You have to give that. You have to have a generous spirit. You can't, all my ratatouille moments, you know, when the first time I burnt a lobster biscuit and got screamed at Mary Lane's, you know, it's like, I can't have that. So I can maybe give that to someone. But those memories are very, very primal, and ultimately it's about nurturing. And so in the spirit of generosity, the spirit of nurturing, the spirit of education, Native Foods right now is at an amazing juncture to where we have this opportunity that has never existed before. For me in my humble kitchen up at Sunrise, the White Mountain Apache tribe, we've never had a team of Apaches that could do what we do now. And we still use that with humility. When we saw the food and wine article, it was like, you know, it was like we say in Apache, we're like, show, you know what I mean? It's like, what do we do now, you know? But we have to be careful with big notoriety like that because of what it creates. The perception of that certain publication instills this grandiose image of about us and our pathway as Native chefs, and it's not that. Ours, we're at home, at the grassroots level, on the community, cooking with a team of Apaches, making sure that we keep that spirit of reciprocity come alive through the food again. And so it goes to our staff members that in turn take it home, and then they talk about it, you know? It's like taking a handful of pebbles and throwing it across a pond. And they all have a ripple effect that touch one another eventually. So really cool in that way. I pulled up I want to get the Western idea of definition of spirit. So I went to Wikipedia, right? So the English word spirit has many different meanings and connotations, most of them relating to non-corporeal substance contrasted with the material body. The word spirit, often used metaphysically to refer to the consciousness or personality. The notion of a person's spirit and soul also overlap, as both contrast with body and both are understood as surviving bodily death in religion or occultism. The spirit can have a sense of ghost, i.e. manifestation in the spirit of a deceased person. So what they left out is that everything has a spirit. We believe that, we hear it all the time. It's almost cliche in Native communities. The stones have a spirit. Yes, they do, you know, everything. So when my attempt to try to share my interpretation or the way I see spirit and food is I really try to take you on a journey through time and space. One that takes us rooted here in the soil in New Mexico, but it also shoots us eons into the universe and right back to now, because it's all connected, right? Interconnectedness. So when we're able to understand our own history as Native peoples and as humans also, we begin to better understand the elements that animate our world. For me in my kitchen, my kitchen would appear to my hero chefs, all my hero chefs, some of them that may have been mentioned in the article, it would be, run down, beat up, dilapidated, But there's different elements and reasons that it's that way, misconceptions of Apaches managing business, misconceptions of social and communal oppression in the community, So food to me is a way to combat the violence in the community, the graffiti on the wall, the domestic violence in our homes, the hurt within our hearts. So I hope that what you take from this are strong themes of health, because when we talk about health, I don't want to just talk about it in a way that's medicinal or scientific. We want to open it up and look at the dimensions of health. So there's the spiritual dimension, the emotional dimension, the physical, we can take it down into all the way to the atomic, So all these dimensions, and the same thing applies to recovery and social recovery. So taking the dynamics of recovery, say when we think of recovery in many forms, we think of drugs and alcohol right away, But no, that's the symptom of many, many other things. So recovery from incarceration, violence, trauma, abandonment, isolation, alienation, colonization, Many, many things, they're all spaghettied together, you know what I mean? And they kind of affect who we are and who we see ourselves as. So I hope you take strong notes of resiliency from what I have to say, because each and every one of these food relatives that I bring with me, I was walking, my wife Jandy and I were walking back from the car, and I saw these yucca, these Apache bananas right here. It's like, there's food in there, there's food out there, So this guy here, he has a story to tell. He has a character. He has a voice. He has a cultural protocol. He has a way to be treated that he will respond best to. You can't grill him right away. You got to slow roast him. If you just try to saute in olive oil, it tastes kind of funny, But if you get the smoke and the char and a little bit of salt, he has his own identity, So really, really interesting things. So he is coming back. He is being spoken for again. So we have seed advocacy, we have food advocacy, and we have land advocacy. Because without us as the conduits, without us as the carriers of memory, we can't transmit these important stories of ethnography, of ethno poetics, of anthropology, of history. So in a very profound way, all these things come back full circle. So that hopefully you can hear resiliency that I always want to try to say. Make it simple. Someone knocks you down, you get right back up. Life's knocked us all down. So, and another one that reminds me of a chef friend of mine is responsibility. He's always talking about responsibility. We have a responsibility to our elders. We have a responsibility to ourselves. We have a responsibility to our posterity. Those that aren't even in physical form yet, they're with us already, So we hope that you can, in understanding our buzzword historical trauma, understanding our social ills, these all have root causes, but the whole point of having a sense of responsibility and courageous humility is to be able to understand that. So I liken it to understanding the 5 stages of loss, going through grief, going through anger, going through frustration, and finally getting to the point where you accept and you begin to move on. It's like being at a threshold of change where you're contemplating a life without things that made you safe before. You step through it, and it's a revolution, And it's only one that you can feel. So all these things come through when we talk about responsibility, resiliency, and to try to capture spirituality, geez, it's like, how do you do that? Each and every one of you have your own pathway, your families, your friends, your favorite foods, your life travels on this small, tiny, little tiny planet, It all has a root and a core that touches you. So very, very powerful sense of what we're trying to instill. I like to use the term that we're weaving a tapestry, a gastronomic tapestry of resiliency and tenacity and courage and social recovery, that each and every one of you gathered here now have a responsibility because you've been presented with some principles, some truths. So now what are you going to do with some of these things that speak to your heart? Are you going to keep them for yourselves, or are you going to take them home, you know, and share them? So creating this tapestry, each and every one of you are a string in the rug, right? In the Navajo rug. And it's neat. I use that analogy, but my Navajo side, the clan is Zia Weaver clan. Okay, you know. So it's like, wow, cool, man. It's crazy, you know. So in trying to capture, where does spirit come from? Like spirit, like for me, when I'm in the kitchen, I talk loud and I talk fast. Right now, I'm deliberately trying to speak slow. I saw a video of myself on YouTube. I'm like, man, I'm all over the galaxy, you know? It's like, so trying to be deliberate and choose words carefully, sensitively, because the energy that I draw down from the cosmos and transmit out through my voice affects you. It affects how I feel, and it will affect how you interact in your own pathway. So understanding where does that come from, putting power to words. How do you capture spirit? So it's really important to remember in capturing foods and to try to find the spirit in them. Like we know agriculture or farming is very hard, right? But what in life is worth our time if it's not difficult, right? So what principles emerge in farming? Ant power, right? Working together. Appreciation, humility, work ethic, responsibility, duty, nurturing, you know, awareness of the seasons. All these things begin to come when we begin to just simply plant a corn. It's like Chef Lois said this morning, when we bring back a single ingredient, it's not, he's just not the only one. He's got a bunch of friends that want to come too, right? His harvesting songs, his protocol, how he expects to be treated, you know, otherwise he's not going to taste too good and he's going to bite you, you know. But he also brings with him the baskets and the technology to harvest these guys, you know? And so all food knowledge is intricately connected from like we wrote on your literature, it says, listen to your three sisters. Well, they're speaking. They're talking to responsibility. They're talking to symbiotic relationships. They're talking to humility. That's cosmic, you know, it blows my mind. So when we think of plant foods that are wild and cultivated and how these all have spirit, think of what is spirit. It's so intangible, but we know it's real. I have no doubt that it's real, you know. So the way that I look at it and the way that it was shown to me is that plants are the carriers of memory. They're our first teachers. They carry lessons and they teach and enable you and grow. There's a philosophy, a story behind white corn. There's a color in the medicine wheel for red corn. There's a whole philosophy and story for blue corn, intertwined in our creation stories, very, very deeply rooted. So what carries this information to these plant relatives? Sunlight. So sunlight is the carrier of memories, and it's a frequency. So 100 billion light years ago, an ancestral nova exploded, shooting its cosmic forces out. Thousands and thousands of light years, we're finally getting this information. So this, to me, and by looking at using those Western terms in science and technology and medicine, it's like science is only beginning, modern science and modern medicine is only beginning to prove that life is a complete spiritual experience. It's like, wow, you know, crazy. For me, I completely believe that. So examples of spirit in food, Western Apache acorn stew. We were talking about acorns in the previous panel. You know, we're saying acorns are like Apaches. They're real bitter in the beginning, but they're sweet on the end, you know, our white acorns. One time I tried to create, when I was like 19, I tried to, and this kind of demonstrates my indoctrination into the Western culinary world. You know, I thought mirepoix, who knows what mirepoix is? Carrot, celery, onions. I thought mirepoix would improve Apache acorn stew. So I'm at home, you know, chopping up mirepoix and sweating it and making acorn stew with this classical French edition. Well, it tasted nothing like acorn. You know, it took away from it, and it wasn't what it was. You know, and my mom and grandma was laughing at me. You know, like, what are you doing? Like, all right, little Nephi is playing around again. You know, so in moving forward with our foods, letting things be what they are is very, very important. Innovation is great and everything, but if you don't understand the basic identity of ourselves or this guy, there's no foundation to build on. So in capturing spirit, we remember that plants carry the information that we crave. So this whole process of reciprocity is cosmic. It's a cosmological relationship with land and earth, you know, with self. It's mind-blowing. It's crazy, you know. I always say that the native chefs out there, when I kick back and I get to watch them speak, I'm watching these chefs talk and they perform and they do their thing, and it's like, wow, man, these guys are like, and I'm watching the public or people listen to the native chefs as an observer of myself in the crowd, and it's like these native chefs, we're like cosmonauts, you know, we're like, got a space helmet on and light years ahead, talking about emotional intelligence and cooking, talking about spirit, talking about healing and recovery, talking about the future, you know, when the culinary world right now is talking about power, property, prestige, you know. The culinary world right now is talking about indigeneity, you know, so they're sending people to look at the practice of eating insects, you know, an indigenous practice. The practice of eating insects is changing our protein source as we get more populated. So a lot of very important contributions from native peoples. So the spirit of native foods right now, for me as a chef, I'm really excited about doing all kinds of really cool, intricate dishes, you know. I've been lucky enough to like stage in a 2-star Michelin restaurant in Chicago called Grace, you know. It's like, wow, you know, and seeing native foods being applied there, and then my food relatives in White River saying, come home, do that to us, you know. That's the way I see it, you know. But that's all great, but Native American cuisine right now is in an age of conceptualization, you know. We have to capture the spirit to understand it before we begin to move forward. Because if you say, what's native cuisine? The first example they're going to give you is an example of cultural oppression and conquest and colonization. What's native cuisine? Fried bread. They're just throwing conquest right back on your table, you know. So we've got a long way to go, and having a sense of tactfulness in how we choose our words, the dishes we decide to choose and to create, and letting them be what they are, you know. I always say that native cooking right now is a form of ethno poetry. It's just happening. It's an anthropological occurrence that's occurring, you know. And any outside influence is only going to disrupt its beautiful, delicate evolution right now. So really cool time if you just kind of just look at it and frame it and let it speak to you, you know. Native American cuisine in this age of conceptualization, the spirit of native foods and all foods has the direct power to combat structural violence and the resulting fields, you know. We know about structural violence in our communities, the reservation system, the black and blue eyes, the young kids in gangs, the graffiti on the walls. That's a result of disconnection from food relatives and our cosmological awareness of each other. So the food has that direct power to do it, but it needs practitioners. It needs to go home. That's why I'm saying my community right now is dying for this information, you know. It touches me because it's real. So remember those things as we move forward. It can combat despondency, that feeling when like I lost my dad like 4 years ago. I went into despondency. Oh man, it's over, you know. Crazy, but the foods were the anchor point that yanked me out of that pity of self-sorrow, you know. It can combat depression, combat direct violence it can combat. It strikes right at the heart of imperialism and colonialism. It strikes at the heart and suffocates oppression. If colonialism has an appetite and it's hungry, because all things live, right, and all things have a spirit, colonialism is hungry, has a ravaging appetite for violence and oppression. Well, Native Foods has a hunger and desire for growth and humility. So that's the spirit of Native Foods right now. And it's all inclusive, interconnected, speckled corn, So it all requires, as we push forward again and again, more and more, this paradigm shift from not a monetary value system, a physical property value system, but back to our ancestral knowledge, our pre-contact ways of living that was a food and water economy, food and water-based economy, food and water-based value system. And that is where the power is at, and I think that's where the future of food is going. In Chicago, they said, "What's the future of food?" And it's like, wow, what's coming? It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know. And for me, I can only speak, everything that I speak comes from, like me, my experience. So I've got, my suspicion is that it's staying a step ahead of the game, is that it's, emotional intelligence and cooking. The emotional intelligence and cooking. So think about who cooks. Think about why they cook. What's the story behind somebody that does practice food waste? Each and every one of you has a generous spirit and a desire to feed and a desire to nurture. So emotional intelligence in the future of food, I think, is very important. Always thinking about empowerment in capturing the spirit of food, indigenizing and decolonizing classical culinary themes. One of our favorite ones in my kitchen is taking the classical French hierarchy, that's a triangle, with me at the top throwing knives and cussing people out and degrading them, That's what the classical method, very militaristic. So for us, we want to reverse that and indigenize it in our pathway to find an alternative. So we turn that pyramid into a circle, and we put the goal in the middle. We put each sacred direction as a leader, executive chef in the east, because that's where the ideas come from, right? The birth of a daytime, tzahakes, that's where the ideas come from. South, sous chef, west, manager, top owner maybe. I don't know, and then so in that circle, every person is next to, say, a commis, a prep cook, a line cook, a waitstaff. So in the spirit of Native peoples and our universal recognition of the circle, it's circular development. And this is what our communities have been based on. That's the spirit of food, that reciprocity. So it's really so cool to see, if we would use Western terms that are less than 100 years old, we call it, we're using industrial psychology. We build people before we build power and prestige and capital, No, it's an indigenous trait. That's where the spirit of food is at. So terms that I'd like to share is Ethno Poetics, one of my recent favorite ones that one of my scholar friends in the Northwest told me. He's like, man, it's ethno poetry. Don't worry about what Chef someone so-and-so says, So don't worry about it. It's happening. It's an occurrence for the culture. Just let it go, Be cautious with the steps. Use the ancestral knowledge sensitively and build on principles. So it's like, wow, man, yeah, that's it, So I hope that we're able to continue to share and learn and grow. I feel like this is a point in time in American history that we're asserting ourselves with respect to land advocacy, seed advocacy, to understand the ethno-genocide of people, land, and waters, but also move forward with a sense of responsibility with these opportunities that have never, ever existed before, ever. So, and then it requires, that speckled corn, 25 years ago, this was the native chef in America. See that little black corn right there, the little purple corn? Well, now it's, like Lois said, it's speckled and it's integrating, and we're pushing to get it in schools and systems. I'm pushing to remain at home and train and work and be humble because, man, that Food and Wine magazine came out. I could be all, yeah, man, some Food and Wine. But, I go show it to some people in White River. They don't know. They don't have time to read Food and Wine. They're more focused on surviving our reality right now. And that keeps me humble, you know? It's like I'm very insignificant in this big significant picture, you know? I always say that, I always tell my young cooks, and I tell myself that only you can do it, but you can't do it alone, you know? So very, very powerful principles of our reality. And so in closing, you know, listen to the intimate voices within foods because they tell an ancient story, and they're all standing on pillars of principles that are human, not specifically just Apache, you know, or just Hopi, or just Navajo, or just Pueblo. They're human universal principles that unite us. And when we have the ability to use food as an axis for learning, to pull things together, it's an internal revolution that begins at home. And it's life-altering and powerful, atomic, cosmological, and humble. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.